It seemed like he was looking for an opportunity to sneak into the mansion. However, there were knights stationed around the building. It seemed difficult even for Cloud to break through that security. Even she, who prided herself on being one step ahead of Cloud, seemed to have trouble getting in there. Cloud sighed, unable to tell whether he felt sorry or fortunate, and hid in the shadows like before, watching the movements of the mansion. Well, it's no different than before. That was enough to keep an eye on Cloud. Now he planned to leave to find out who was under so much security. If only a sign of popularity hadn't suddenly appeared behind the building he was hiding in. Obviously there was no one there. Why did he suddenly feel like there was someone there again? He quickly turned his head and looked towards the alley. That person. That boy then? Unexpectedly, there was a boy wearing a hoodie and smiling mischievously. It was clearly the boy he had met in Grunfeld's alley. The boy hurried his steps with an excited expression. He must have been very excited to sneak outside. Thanks to that, he didn't seem to notice the noise his footsteps were making. It wasn't just Isla who felt his presence. Cloud, who was hiding in the back alley, also noticed their presence and moved back along the wall of the building. With such a dull body, you did a good job of eluding the servant. No, I guess it's natural since I used movement magic. At that moment, while Isla was silently laughing at the boy, she suddenly realized something strange. The boy he saw in Grunfeld was here too. It couldn't be a coincidence, right? Could it be that Byron followed that boy? The possibility was not completely ruled out. The boy was rich enough to spend the expensive magic scroll on his nightly entertainment. There was no clearer evidence than the fact that the boy was present wherever Cloud went. Isla felt embarrassed and turned her gaze to Cloud. Cloud stared at the boy blankly for a moment. His expression was as if he couldn't believe that the person he was chasing suddenly appeared in front of him. But when he lowered his head for a moment and raised it again, his gaze was sharper than ever. It was like a wild beast that had found its prey. Cloud looked at the boy and began to chase him. As he did so, he carefully removed a gun from his pocket. It was a sharp dagger. It's dangerous. They are trying to kill that boy. Although he didn't know who that immature brat was or why Cloud was trying to hurt him, his body moved first. I couldn't let that little guy die. He quickly scanned the surrounding terrain from above and advanced along the boy's path at the highest speed he could reach. She jumped and grabbed the arm of the walking boy, having no idea of the danger that would soon strike him. Oh. The boy felt embarrassed and tried to say something, but he couldn't because Isla covered his mouth. Isla dragged the boy and hid. Looking from the roof, he saw that there was a hole where he could hide under the terrace of the first floor of this building, so he dragged the boy there. Although he was a boy taller and heavier than her, he was dragged by Isla's strong force without being able to resist. The boy began to struggle when he finally regained consciousness, but stopped struggling when he recognized Isla, who put her hand on his lips and said, "Shoo. Look over there, idiot." Isla was still covering the boy's mouth and with her other hand she pointed in the direction of where Cloud was. The boy's eyes widened when he saw the assassin searching for him in a panic, holding a dagger in his hand. Now I don't have to cover his mouth. He removed his hand from the boy's mouth. As the boy tried with all his might to make a sound, his hands were covered in saliva. Yuck. Isla looked at her hand with a disgusted expression and wiped the saliva off by rubbing it on the boy's black cloak. Despite this, the boy did not show the slightest sign of dissatisfaction and only watched Cloud's movements with a frightened expression. Shit. Cloud had been searching for the boy's whereabouts several times, uttered harsh words, and disappeared into the distance. Once Cloud was out of sight, the boy tried to leave. She grabbed his arm. Don't go out yet. I'll check first and come back. Yes, yes. Perhaps because she saved his life, the boy obediently followed her instructions. After leaving, she climbed onto the roof and looked around, but Cloud was nowhere to be seen. When she jumped to the ground and landed softly, the boy, as if amazed every time he saw him, looked at her with his golden eyes shining and his eyes peering out from the ground. "What are you really? Are you human?" The image of the boy hiding in the dirt, sticking his face out. And asking that question was quite funny. This made her burst out laughing. Was it really a person? What kind of question was that? So what am I if I'm not human? Get out. He's gone. Yeah. Thank you, miss. At her words, the boy crawled out of his hiding place and expressed his gratitude. Unable to understand the reason for adding "I" so late, Isla looked at the boy with a perplexed expression. "Why are you suddenly being polite?" "Well, you are my lifesaver, miss." If he was going to use half-deference like that, it would have been better to just talk casually. She burst out laughing. "Speak informally, as always. It's very fun." After laughing for a while, he wiped the corners of his eyes and finally spoke. He laughed so hard that tears formed in the corners of his eyes. "Okay then." The boy seemed to think that Isla was laughing at him and responded with a sullen expression. But he had a refreshing expression on his face. It had been a long time since he had smiled sincerely. No, he couldn't even remember if he had ever laughed so comfortably in his life. Why did Cloud try to kill this guy anyway? Could it be that this boy was the young lion mentioned in the letter? Isla looked at the boy with a lot of dirt on her face and blurted out her true feelings without realizing it. "No, this is not young, this is young." "I?" At Isla's words, the boy became angry and asked. "If you tell a child that he is small, he will get angry. You keep looking at me and telling me I'm young. How old are you?" the boy asked in a proud voice. "I? 12, no, 12. She almost said her age before being killed by Byron without realizing it, but quickly corrected herself. The boy then raised his voice as if to ask her to look at him. "Am I 2 years older than you? But don't you think it's strange that you always end up saying that I'm young? That's how it is. You are definitely young. Is it time for you to raise your voice about something like this? What happens if they catch you?" When she said it as if it were absurd, the boy covered his mouth as if he didn't want to. There might still be people around him who want to take his life, but watching him get so angry at being treated like a child. It was clearly a boy. Isla opened her mouth with a voice that seemed to be surprised. "Doesn't the fact that you're older than me change the fact that you're a child? I am young and so are you." "That too." He was a very understanding child. Isla looked at the boy with a smile on her face and then noticed that his clothes were covered in dirt. It seemed like it was hidden underground. "Oh, wait. Maybe my clothes." She felt embarrassed and looked at her clothes. Not only her black cloak, but also the white nightgown she wore underneath was covered in dirt. It was a crisis. If he continued like this, it was obvious that Laura would find out that he went out secretly. Isla was crying. "What's happening? Are you afraid of being scolded for getting your clothes dirty?" The boy, who noticed that she was crying when looking at her clothes, asked. Isla nodded unconsciously. In fact, it was a little difficult to express that she was scolded for the difficulties ahead. It was because he wouldn't let it go if he found out I was out. She even thought that it would be better to just run away like this, reveal that she was the only lost daughter of the Duke of Weishafen, and return to her biological parents. Since it was a big city, there was surely someone who could help her. His hair had turned completely white and was not working well, but he thought about how to overcome this situation and thought about it countless times. The boy looked at her in silence, took out a piece of paper rolled up and tied with a ribbon from his pocket. "There is only one left, but I can't stand by and watch my savior find himself in such a difficult situation. The boy spoke with a very serious voice. Although she didn't know what he was trying to do, Isla watched him silently. I order you to awaken your dormant power and help me. The boy recited a spell with a rather attractive smile and then untied the ribbon tied to the paper. Then, mysteriously, the paper burst into flames and disappeared into thin air. The scroll that disappeared into thin air turned into a mysterious smoke of light that surrounded Isla's body. Surrounded. Isla, who had her eyes wide open because she couldn't understand what was happening, looked at her body while turning her gaze from side to side. What? Even the smoke around Isla dissipated into the air and disappeared, and her clothes, which were covered in dirt, were as clean as if they had just been washed. As? Incredible, right? Great, right? It's a washing spell.